Welcome to today's United Nations panel brought to you by the George Washington University Center for Career Services. My colleague Tara Dupre and I are delighted that we are able to bring together 4 UN professionals who are eager to share their advice and perspectives with you. Tara and I currently run GW's UN 360 program, which typically showcases a variety of global good organizations for a small cohort of students. But each year we offer events to the broader GW community based on the relationships we develop through the UN 360 program. Before I hand it over to Tara, our moderator for today's discussion, I'd like to share a few housekeeping tips and reminders. Today's webinar will be recorded. Cameras and mics have been disabled with the exception of our panelists. In addition, chat capabilities have also been disabled in order to streamline the conversation. You are invited to submit questions via the Q&A feature throughout the presentation. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Tara, and she will lead the panel discussion, which will last approximately 40 minutes, and then there will be plenty of time for you to get your questions answered at the end.
Thank you, Kelly. Hello, everyone. We are excited to see so many GW students join us for today's esteemed panel. And of course, we are grateful to our panelists and are delighted to have 4 UN experts willing to share their time and experience with all of you. We have actually one other panelist who will be joining us, and so you might see another screen or picture pop up shortly. So our aim for the conversation is to provide you with insights from the years of experience represented by our panelists, while also offering you concrete and frank advice about navigating into a UN career. You received the panelist bios in advance, so rather than my poor attempt at summarizing their rich experience, I will start the conversation today by asking each panelist to tell us a bit about their current role, as well as a bit about their time or path into the UN system. So I'm going to start with Carmen. If you could kick us off. Carmen is working at UNICEF and is working on the talent outreach team.
Thank you very much, Tara. Kelly, Rachel, I'm very happy to be here today. And greetings to students from GWU. My name is Carmen Munoz. I serve as Human Resource Officer with UNICEF. My journey has been quite short because I recently joined UNICEF not too long ago, 4 years exactly. My professional path has been in human resources as well as in information technology as well as education. So I'll speak about a little bit about the UN and UNICEF. So I was eager to find myself wanting to help people and do something that related to people. I knew that I had all the technical skills when it came to certain areas, but what I was most interested in was finding something that made me feel good. So hence my journey into wanting to work for UN system as well as UNICEF. Once I did, it took some time, but I will say that my job here has been very fulfilling. I've gotten to learn a lot of things about working in international and development context, as well as international relations, and all while safeguarding the rights of mothers and children across the globe. So that's it in a nutshell, and I look forward to answer your questions further on.
Thank you, Carmen. All right, so if we can move to Stefania Pisanelli, who is the Deputy Director of UN Information Center. Stefania?
Yes, thank you, Tara. Thank you very much for inviting us today. So as Tara says, I work for the United Nations Secretariat, in particular for its Information Center in Washington. Let me tell you, I'm sure everybody knows what UNICEF does. Let me tell you in a second what the Secretariat does. So the Secretariat is one of the main organs of the United Nations, along with the Security Council, the General Assembly, and others. You can find in the Charter of the UN, explanation of what our mandate is. We are the largest employer. We have around 40,000 staff, and we do basically three groups of tasks. One is the normative work of the UN, basically basically legislation, and we do it through resolutions. As you know, the resolutions of the Security Council are binding on the member states of the United Nations. The resolutions of the General Assembly are morally binding. So when a country votes positive for a resolution in the General Assembly, the expectation is that that country will follow the letter of the resolution. For example, all the resolutions that have to do with Syria, with Yemen, and so on are binding. The resolution of the General Assembly that adopted the Sustainable Development Goals, for example, is not, but the expectation is that since governments vote into it, they will now implement it. Second big basket is all the work in peace and security. We have around 30 missions deployed in the field in countries that are experiencing conflict, post-conflict, political strife, with 100,000 blue helmets deployed. Believe it or not, it's the second deployed army in the world after the one of the United States. We have a different posture, as you may imagine, than a regular army. And we don't have our own soldiers, so member states contribute soldiers, and we say that they get rehatted because they take away the uniform of their countries and they put the blue helmet on. Third last basket is coordination of the work of humanitarian actors and development actors at field level in over 130 countries. What my current job entails in Washington is to do what is called government relations, working with an important member of the United Nations, the United States, which is one of the very few that is both a permanent member of the Security Council and the top contributor. It is to explain the work of the UN, which is what I'm doing with you today. And my hidden agenda is to convince you to look at a career with the UN. And what I conclude by saying that I entered at the UN. I was first an intern, and then a JPO, and then a YPP. And please hold on with the acronyms because we will go through all of them very soon. And I am an economist by background. Thank you, Tara. Over to you.
Thank you, Stefania. That was a perfect lead-in. Thank you for that. Let's go to Manuel Bracas, who is in Human Resources at the UN Volunteers, UNV.
Hi, Tara. Hi, everyone. My name is Manuel Bracas. I'm very pleased to be here today with you all. I'm based in Bonn, Germany. United Nations Volunteers headquarters is based in Bonn. A little bit of background. I studied linguistics, and 2 months before graduating, it so happened that I started working. I will be disconnected in 54 seconds. So, okay, sorry. I had a, sorry.
That's okay, Manuel. We can.
So I had to write something so that I'm not disconnected.
Okay.
Sorry.
No worries.
I'm closing this. Maybe the technical people should look into it.
What we can do is pause for a moment and let you work out the technical piece, and we can move.
Okay. Yeah.
And we'll come back to you. Okay.
Yep.
So next, we'd love to go to Luciana Akhtar, who is working at the UN Population Fund, UNFPA, and Human Resources.
Hi, good morning from New York, everyone. I hope everyone is having a good Friday so far. Please let me know if you cannot hear me or wave.
You're good.
I am with the United Nations Population Fund, and like Carmen, who it's good to see you again, Carmen, I've been with the UN for 4 years now, 4 years and change. I actually myself started as an intern, and currently, as life would have it, I oversee the Internship Program at the United Nations Population Fund within the Division for Human Resources. I walked into the UN accidentally. Sometimes that happens in life. I was studying, I was in my master's program, International Business and Human Resources, and I happened to see an internship opportunity with the UN Population Fund, and I applied because you don't know until you try, and I got called for an interview, and 4.5 years have passed by since. So I welcome any questions, and thank you for having me today. Great to speak with GW.
Thank you. Manuel, how are you doing over there?
Yeah, sorry for the technical issue. I think I managed that window that popped up in my screen. So I was saying that same as Rushana, I also joined accidentally the UN. I started working for the Red Cross initially, and then one day I see this newspaper advertisement. I'm talking about 18 years ago. So, I said, why not to throw an application? But by this, I don't want anybody to throw applications, but to make good applications. So, and then I started 18 years ago as HR assistant, and later on, I joined. 4 years later, I joined the United Nations Volunteers Program here in Bonn, and now I'm in charge of the talent pool, taking care of the talent acquisition and management. The United Nations Volunteers Program talent pool is one of the famous and oldest one. We are very much known for sending people from country A to country B as volunteers. Some people know us for allowing the global citizen to enter the UN. We give opportunities also through our different contract modalities to young people who do not necessarily have prior UN work experience. But for all of this, I think we will speak during this discussion. Thank you.
Yes, that's a perfect lead-in. Thank you, Manuel. So what we want to get right into are the entry points to get into the UN system. So as Stefania and Manuel has already mentioned, there are some that are cross-cutting across multiple UN organizations. So actually, why don't we start with you, Manuel, to give us kind of a breakdown of what students need to know about becoming a UN volunteer, how that works, who's qualified, kind of the basics.
Sure. Thank you very much, Tara. This is a great opportunity for us because one of our aims is to diversify our talent pool with people who come from various occupational backgrounds, educational backgrounds, as well as especially female candidates who are highly encouraged to apply. United Nations Volunteers Program is mandated by the General Assembly as the volunteering pillar in the UN. So basically, we provide volunteers to all the UN agencies. Our biggest partner currently is UNDP, United Nations Development Program, where, as we speak, we have around 2,500 UN volunteers, followed by the Secretariat with the UN missions. In each and every mission, we have almost between 20 to 30% of the total civilian personnel. And what I want to highlight here is the different modalities that we have for volunteering. To start with, we have a youth modality whereby people from 18 to 29 years of age are eligible to apply. Within the youth modality, one doesn't necessarily need to have a prior work experience. In the contrary, people who have more than 2 years of work experience are not eligible to apply for youth opportunities. This is an opportunity given to youth who we want to be part of the UN process so that they can contribute their time and skills for the good cause, which could be peace or development worldwide. So this audience, I want to advise to keep a close eye to the youth opportunities that we oftentimes publish in our public website. I have sent to you earlier the link to our website, as well as where the opportunities are posted frequently. I see that it's now in the chat window, so thank you very much. As well as maybe the audience would like to follow us in LinkedIn. LinkedIn is growing every day. It's a platform, it's a social channel where we post opportunities, but also we post time to time most frequently asked questions. We post volunteer voices as well as other important messages related to volunteering. So I invite everybody to follow us there. Now, contrary to some other UN agencies whereby the classical way of applying is a post is advertised and then people apply against that post. In our case, we use both advertising but also registration in our talent pool. So people who have registered in our talent pool, we play the matching the demand with the supply. While the demand is all the requests that come from UNFPA, Secretariat, or UNICEF, for example, the supply is the people who register in our database. We have a team of recruiters who looks into that, looks into the eligibility criteria, requirements of different opportunities, and does the matching. Now, to put a realistic note on all this, because I don't want that everybody thinks that tomorrow everybody can be a UN volunteer, I just wanted to say that the process is quite competitive. Why? Because simply the supply and the demand do not match. While we have a large number of applications in our talent pool, the number of demands from the host entities or UN agencies is obviously much lower than the supply. I don't want to discourage no one, but just so that we all understand why sometimes it may not work or it may not work as fast as we have expected. To give a sort of optimistic message, we have within a year around 8,000 volunteers serving, out of which 3,500 are new recruits. So it's quite a good number that gives an opportunity to many people to taste from inside how does the UN work. I have seen and I've spoken to many people who come to us and they say, this volunteering opportunity helped me to make an informed decision whether the international cooperation arena is something that I wanted to do for long term. Or it gave me an opportunity to look from inside, how does it work in the UN? Or for some people, it expanded their regional or international networking. And I think it's worth to try. I've been with the program for 15, 16 years now almost. And I'm glad that I'm part of the program because of its mandate. And I think that this is something that we will hear from many people who work for the UN. UN happens to be that organization that has a nice reputation, that is respected, thank God, and many people would like to be part of the UN structures with the rights to do so. And I'm happy that I'm with the UN, and I encourage everybody to try. But later on, when you ask us those difficult questions like how, then I will try to give you a couple of tips as well.
Great. Thank you, Manuel. All right. So, Stefania, if you could touch on the YPP and the JPO, those acronyms you used earlier, can you give us a little bit more detail about the differences between those two programs and who's eligible?
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Tara. And it's so good that I come after Manuel because it's a sort of a nice segue. So the entry point at the junior level of the professional category in the UN Secretariat. Here, let me add a note, please. As you know, the UN system is very broad. There are specialized agencies, funds, and programs. So unfortunately, we do not have a one-stop shop for recruitment in the UN system. So you have to think what your interest is. No doubt there is an organization that caters to that interest. Then you have to go in the website of that organization and find out how their recruitment process works. So I'm only talking about the UN Secretariat. So the YPP in the Secretariat is basically the equivalent of the, entry-level exam in the diplomatic service, in the foreign service. It is open to applicants who are up to 32 years old, and it is offered once a year only to applicants from countries that are underrepresented in the Secretariat. What does it mean? The Secretariat is the most political of all the UN organizations. There are 193 member states. Each of them has the right to a certain number of posts, which depend on a number of variables, including financial contribution to the organization. So, as you may imagine, the US has the right to have a large number of US citizens in the organization. So if you are interested in the YPP program, please keep it in mind that for this year, the deadline to apply is the 31st of October. So it's super timely, Tara and Catherine, that you brought us together today. So you would have to go in the website of the United Nations, YPP, you do a Google search, it comes out right away. You will see whether your country offers an exam this year. And then that's not the end of the story. You have also to see in what categories the United Nations offer the exam. This year, it is offering the exam in the following 3 categories: political affairs and human rights, administration, and global communications. That depends on the needs of the organization. So these are the 3 occupational groups we need at the moment. If you fall within, if you meet the requirements, you have a college degree, you are less than 32 years old, and your skills fall in one of these 3 categories, and most importantly, you belong to a country that is underrepresented, you are eligible to apply. Now, as Manuel says, there is a mismatch between demand and supply. So obviously, since, and the requirements, sorry, I forgot to mention, like Manuel said, since it's an entry-level exam, no work experience is required in theory, I'm sorry to say. Because again, when you have so many more applicants than positions, you go for the more qualified. And since the age limit is 32, as you may imagine, newly graduates find themselves at a disadvantage. Why? Because, you know, we receive thousands of applications, and we are able to invite hundreds of them to a written test. And obviously, to go through that bottleneck, what helps is your experience. So while you are absolutely encouraged to look, if you are interested in the entry-level exam of the UN, to look into it, and you can apply as many times as you wish, there is no limit. But keep in mind that a good strategy is maybe start by beefing up your profile to increase your chances to go through that bottleneck. The exam is very fair. I was in the board of examiners for economics, and believe me, I never knew who was behind that written test. I only saw a number, and 3 of us would go through each exam to make sure that there was no bias. Now, how do we strengthen our chances to go through that bottleneck? The UNB program is an excellent way to go. Another way to think about it is the JPO program, which brings me to another of our acronyms. The JPO is also an entry-level opportunity at the professional level in the UN Secretariat, but this time this program is sponsored by governments. So a number of governments sponsor their nationals for a number of years, usually 2 years, in different parts of the UN system. After those 2 years, the United Nations doesn't have any obligation to recruit you. However, after you have accumulated 2 years of experience, you have built a network, your chances are much higher to be able to find something to stay on. Now, as I said before, also for the JPO, there is not a one-stop shop. If you look at United Nations JPO in Google, you will go to a page managed by the Department of Economic and Social Affairs that gives you information about the JPOs in the Secretariat. But there are JPOs in UNICEF and in other organizations. So what I advise you to do is to research whether your country is actually offering the program. So you have to do a little bit of search yourself and then see in what organizations those opportunities are offered. Lastly, if I may, Tara, another, in my opinion, extremely powerful avenue to beef up your CV is working for NGOs. And NGOs, in my opinion, have two very important features that you may want to consider. They may be a little less competitive to get in, and they are much more horizontal in terms of structures compared to the UN Secretariat, which is a super hierarchical organization. In an NGO, your visibility as a junior person is likely to be much higher than inside the Secretariat, where for a number of years at the beginning of your career, you stay in the back. And lastly, although it is not necessarily a remunerative opportunity, internship, in my opinion, are another very good way to do two things. As Manuel said, to get you a feel for the organization. Not everybody is a good fit in an international organization. And two, to beef up that profile. You know, I said before that I was an intern at JPO and the YPP. I am very positive that if I was not an intern, and here we are talking more than 20 years ago, so I realized that it was much easier to get an internship in those days than it is now. But if without that internship, I doubt I would have made it into the JPO program paid by my government. And without the JPO on my, in my CV, I'm not sure I would have made it through that bottleneck in the YPP program. And here I stop, Tara, and happy to answer any more detailed questions. Over to you.
Thank you. That was wonderful. So I'd love to get to Carmen and to Lashana. You two are representing your both two different agencies. So if you could speak a little bit about your respective UN organizations, what internship and professional opportunities are available for new professionals and students. So let's start with you, Carmen.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sarah. So many of my colleagues have already mentioned various of the talent programs and initiatives that we have in UNICEF. We also have the junior professional as well as the United Nations volunteers. But now let's talk about the internship program, which Stefania alluded to. So the internship program with UNICEF allows eligible and qualified students the ability to be able to gain practical work experience, not only within the functional areas, but for you to also understand what it's like to work within the humanitarian context and for the United Nations. It's a very complex environment, so identifying internships are a great entry point because they are up to from 6 weeks all the way up to 26 weeks. So what this does is it gives you a feel of what it's like to do the work there as well as within what areas. To be considered for an internship, there are a few criteria. You have to be enrolled in an undergraduate, graduate, or PhD program, or have graduated within the last 2 years. In addition to that, you have to possess one of the UN's working languages. It's definitely an asset if you have more than one, and definitely pay attention to the vacancy announcements when you apply. And also have excellent academic performance and within the institution as demonstrated by your records. The easiest way to do this is for you to search on the desired UN agency or organization's website. Then you search for an application or vacancy, apply, and once you apply, my tip is a strong motivational letter. Really identify and outline how your work within school and your education applies to the position that you're applying to. It doesn't matter if you have limited or no work experience, but what's important is for you to be able to demonstrate that you have knowledge of what we're speaking about, whether it's health or nutrition, education, being able to speak to some of the current activities going on within those areas, as well as what you know around the world in terms of social events. In addition to that, I think that Stefania also mentioned NGOs, which is also an excellent avenue. Don't be afraid to look at nonprofits and other opportunities to also give you that bit of experience. So I'll stop here, and now over to Lashana.
Thank you, Carmen. You covered a lot of the things that I would want to cover, so thanks for the help. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Just to highlight, UNFPA, the UN Population Fund, the acronym doesn't match the name of the organization, but just so that if you remember anything about UNFPA, which is that our mandate is a little bit longer, so bear with me, but it's absolutely essential and important to everyone's lives. We are the Sexual and Reproductive Health Agency of the United Nations. So if you think of sexual and reproductive health, you may not have any idea what we're talking about, but just to put it into a little bit more of a context, our mission is to deliver a world where every pregnancy is wanted and every childbirth is safe and every young person's potential is fulfilled. So of course, with that in mind, young people's potential, we do work a lot with UNICEF on joint programs. But when it comes to giving birth safely, having every pregnancy being wanted, meaning having access to contraceptives that you may want, it's a basic that you don't even think about perhaps for those in the US, but there are a lot of places in the world that these options are not always available. So if our mandate interests you, or if you're interested in public health or data, come check out UNFPA because the UN Population Fund does a lot of important work. And a couple of entry points to the UN Population Fund that have not already been covered. So UNV, I'm the partnership person for UNV. I highly recommend the UN volunteers just because I've worked with a lot of UN volunteers. My previous boss started his career as a UN volunteer, and he was a director of human resources. So it's a great experience. The JPO, which was already mentioned, the Junior Professional Officer Program. But I think those are great and covered. But our internship program is also fabulous because, one, we offer a stipend. We started it in 2020. The stipend is based on the location of the intern, so your cost of living is given consideration. So if you're in New York or anywhere in the U.S., it would be $1,000 a month just to cover some basic expenses for a full-time intern. So if that isn't motivation, our mandate, then the stipend can help a little too. The way to do it is that you would go to UNFPA's website, click on jobs, and internships come up as an option. And we actually have a roster system. You put in your profile, you put in your details. It doesn't have to be that you're applying for a specific role. You're just registering yourself as being a person who is interested. If you're, as Carmen said, enrolled in a bachelor's program or master's or PhD, you qualify. Or if you've graduated within the last 1 year for UNFPA, so 12 calendar months, you can still apply. We also provide leave days, so you get about 1.5 days a month for every full month being an intern. So we're trying to make it a more work-like experience. But I think the great part of an internship, and I didn't see it as such, it's always a good learning opportunity, but you learn not just about the organization, you learn about yourself. You learn about what interests you, what motivates you, whether you want to do this kind of work. And you never know what opportunities come from just knowing yourself better while you're doing the internship. So I welcome everyone to just register and see what it is that comes along, because it's always good to be open-minded. And I'll pass it back to our great hosts, Tara and Kelly.
Thank you. All right, so we've gotten, I think, a really good foundation of lots of different entry points. So we want to get and spend the remaining panelists' time talking a bit about some tips and specific concrete ideas. One thing I'm curious about, and what we frequently hear from students, is if there are specific hard skills that any of you have seen are in desperate need, or that would be really helpful to include on a cover letter or make sure that they highlight in a CV. Are there particular skills that anyone finds are necessary or needed right now, particularly in your unique UN organization? And feel free, at this point, we're going to popcorn it around, so anyone who has a thought can jump in.
If you don't mind, I'll take this first. So I think this is a really good question, because aside from thinking about the technical skills, we sometimes forget to sell our hard skills and what those things mean. So I would suggest that you definitely take a deeper dive into looking at each organization and look at the skills and values that are with each agency. So for UNICEF, it's all about care, respect, integrity, trust, and accountability. Also being able to demonstrate your communication skills and how you work with people. So if you can tie all those things together, it would be so far a great step ahead, because you're letting them know that you also understand what it's like to work multicultural environment along with different organizations and entities. So I would say definitely try to work a lot more on your communication skills, as well as your ability to work with people in teams and be respectful of others.
Great. Thank you, Carmen. Luciana, you mentioned something about data with UNFPA. So can you speak to any particular, are there unique systems or backgrounds that would be helpful to walk into UNFPA with a data background?
So for UNFPA, I wouldn't say that it's a particular system that you would need to know, but it's basically the depth of knowledge and understanding you have of what it means to have information speak for you. So it's like data is like junk in, junk out. It doesn't, you can put in information together, but when you really want to have information that communicates a message, especially when it comes to speaking to donors, when it comes to communicating how effective a program has been, or the basics, explaining what the needs are, how many people will be affected, how many populations are, considering this as a need. So the data really helps do the work. And so I think just having that basic understanding of how to communicate the data into information that others can understand, people who are not in data backgrounds, is very important. So just to piggyback a bit on what Carmen said, UNFPA, for example, is in 150 countries around the world. So that's a lot of different cultures, that's a lot of different languages, that's a lot of different people from various backgrounds, educations, interests. And so you really do have to have from some very strong communication skills, especially written communication, because sitting in headquarters in New York, most of my communication is via email. Even though I can pick up the phone, I can Skype, I can do all the lovely things like Zoom, there is time difference to consider. So I will write an email. And I have never, ever felt the need to pay so much attention to my written communication. Is it clear? Is it concise? Will the person on the other side understand? Especially, let's say I'm communicating in English, if it's not their first language. Strong communication skills, strong people skills in terms of knowing how to work in an international environment or a diverse environment are also key. So back to the data question, make data something that you can communicate into knowledge so that other people can understand. And then, of course, just your people skills and your communication skills. Thank you.
Thank you. Manuel, Stefania, anything to add on that particular question?
Yes, if I may, Tara, thank you. I mean, I fully endorse what Carmen and Luciana said. On the cultural sensitivity issue, I think it's really important to keep in mind, GW is a very international organization, university, but the UN, you cannot imagine it's a GW to the nth power. That means that networking in an organization like the UN, and networking is an important skill in any work environment. It's a tool that needs to be calibrated very well in the United Nations context because of the different ways we have of working, which we carry depending on our cultural background, education, and so on. For the Secretariat, I would add one variable that we look at. Of course, the technical skills are your business card. It's your business card, you know. We look at how deep is your knowledge of the subject matter. For the Secretariat, it can range from statistics to economics to political affairs, and you name them. But then it's political acumen, because we work with delegates. And it's important to understand the space that we have to operate. That is an acquired, of course, skill, but it's also a bit, you know, you have to show that you are kind of smart from the very beginning on that. That's all for me, Tara.
Great. Manuel, anything else?
You know, coming from a volunteering organization, I would say that on top of and Luciana mentioned, I would also add motivation. We look for motivated individuals who add a little bit of a pinch of soul in what they do. And I think that this is pretty important. I spoke earlier when introducing myself about us being able to bring the fresh blood to the UN or the global citizens to the UN. Who do not necessarily have a prior UN experience. Imagine if on top of this you also add a motivated, enthusiastic spirit, people who love what they do. And if you do this on a volunteering assignment, I can assure you that the entire team will simply fall in love with you. And depending on what would be your career aspirations, this may open many doors later for you to, if you decide so, to stay in the UN or in the wider international cooperation arena.
That's great. Thank you, Manuel. I want to make sure we get to questions, and I recognize we have about 13 minutes. So Kelly, I'm going to ask you to chime in and see how the Q&A is looking.
Great. Yes, we are receiving quite a few questions, and they're sort of coming in a few different categories, which I think are a lot of the questions we were planning to go through. So I will just throw one out to the group, and then Tara, I think you can go, finish up with a few others. I think just due to, obviously, GW is all online this semester, and students are very curious about what online opportunities may be available. I have shared the information specifically about UNV's volunteer online opportunities, but can each of you just speak to your agency and what types of remote opportunities may be available to students and or full-time right now?
If I can jump in on that, we are having intern support remotely, and they would still qualify for the stipend. This is our move in 2020 in reaction to the pandemic, so that's a great opportunity. I'll pause there.
So, Tara, maybe I'll mention opportunities in Washington, D.C. for internships. I think, what may not be well known is that in Washington, D.C., there are, of course, the headquarters of two large organizations within the system, the IMF and the World Bank, but there are some 15 UN entities, including the Unicef and the UNFPA, represented in Washington. And while I commend the UNFPA that she's so ahead of the curve on the virtual side, we are, my office, for example, the Information Center, is indeed offering virtual internships. And as far as I understand, most of the other UN agencies in Washington are. And I think Tara is going to, or Kelly is going to share the website that you can consult to find opportunities for internships in Washington. In terms of the organization, and I'm so glad that Carmen, Luzana, and Manuel are with us, because you are really in the HR, so I'm sure you are doing a lot of thinking about it. So what we have heard from now is probably what has happened as of now. What will happen in the future, I think we don't know yet exactly how the world of international organizations will look like post-COVID. But I expect, and I don't know if colleagues know already something, that there will be innovations. There will be the possibility to work for international organizations from home. Maybe a little less for positions that have a very strong field, that are very exposed to field work. But I'm thinking that some analytical work, some administrative work could increasingly maybe be geographically neutral or location neutral. So something for you to keep in mind, the same way you are trying to struggle to understand how a remote course of study may look like, you may want to think how to prepare yourself for something that we don't know exactly what the contours will look like, but will be different. Already we were in a, already you are different from me. I entered the UN at the very beginning, and I thought that would be my lifetime career. You tend to operate differently. Maybe a lifetime career is not necessarily what works for you, and you are more interested in moving around organizations. That seemed to be already the trend. COVID, it seems to me, has shocked that trend even more and pushed us to think even more creatively on how we can become involved with international organizations in a very different modality. I don't know if Carmen or Luzana have breaking news or something, but I think this is something we have to keep thinking about, and we are not there yet, as far as I know, at least for the secretariat.
Absolutely. Carmen, Manuel, anybody else, anything to add on
Sure.
COVID and the pandemic and the impact it's had on your hiring?
Sure, there's definitely no breaking news, but what I will say, it has accelerated change with all of our organizations to a point that it's redesigned all of our business models. So for UNICEF, we are right now accepting virtual or remote opportunities in terms of different themes. For UNVs, most certainly, as well as for consultancies. We're also redesigning our models not to put so much emphasis on one location, so that if this were to happen again, or we don't know the direction that the environment is going to take, just be able to operate in different contexts so that we don't have any lapses in services. Because remember, even though we're in one location, it does affect the globe and the world. So what I did fail to mention earlier was we do offer stipends as well for our interns, and a lot of these remote opportunities are already available on our website.
Great. Manuel, anything else to add? I know you, Kelly mentioned we added the UNV remote opportunities, but any other insights you want to share?
Yeah, so apart from the volunteering service that we started 8 years ago, and now it proves to be a very valid service, especially at COVID times that there are lots of restrictions of movement. But during this time, we have mobilized around 800 volunteers that are closely related to COVID assignments. And what I've noticed here are two new trends, if I may call them. First, there is an increased number of national volunteers, so people who are nationals of the country where they are serving for. This due to the fact that it was almost difficult to fly in international volunteers, so from other countries. And point number two, as Carmen mentioned, we have had the agreement with all the UN agencies that for the time being and wherever there is a restriction, the volunteers will work from home, so they telecommute. and I fully agree with the point of Stefania that the future of work will be different. We had the signs that it is changing with the advancement of IT and technology, with the global markets and the globalization in general. But the COVID, I think, is that hit that first will prove that working from home or telecommuting is effective, and second will push even further the trend of changing the future of work.
Great, thank you. Kelly, you had a quick question you wanted to ask?
Yes, I know many of you have expressed that you have a certain amount of work experience that you need to have. I know 2 years was mentioned, 3 years for another program. Students want to know, does internship experience count as work experience, and do you have any recommendations of specific experience that looks high, that would look well on a top application?
I can start off with that. For UNFPA, UN Population Fund, unfortunately, internship experience does not count as work experience when we're doing the matching exercise of do you meet the number of years of work experience required for the job application, the vacancy, as we would say, that you are applying for. That being covered, I cannot highlight or stress how much the internship experience helps you in terms of your understanding, your network, your general awareness of the system, and other opportunities that may become available because you did happen to have an internship with the UN, versus trying to get in cold through the door, because you do need to have some kind of experience. Whether it counts as work experience or experience, it's still valuable to the person and the applicant over the long course of their career.
Is anyone different from Luciana's experience on that?
Yes. For the Secretariat, and again, as Luciana said, we are very strict with the calculation of the years. So if the post requires 5 years of relevant work experience, if you have 4 and 11 months, you don't qualify. For the internship, we calculated for half of the time you have served as an intern. So if you have served for 6 months, it will account for 3 months of work experience when we do the calculation. Over.
Yes, Manuel.
In our case, we look at it slightly differently. We say it depends. And then we look at what were the roles and responsibilities that an intern has carried out, and second, the duration. And this is why in most of my talkings with young graduates or people who come to ask for advice, I say, if you go for an internship somewhere, try to stay there as long as you can. Because going and putting in an application that you have been an intern for a few weeks, we all know that those few weeks you hardly know the names of the team, or let alone the mandate, and let alone to make a real contribution. So again, I will say it depends. It depends what was your role. We know that there are a wide variety of internships now in the market. What did you do exactly, and how, and what did you achieve? And this brings me to the next point, that when you write an application with us, try to write it in a strategic way, even if it is about internships that you may have had. Try to, I remember when I wrote my first CV, I put a waiter experience that I had at that time. I was a student as well as an internship experience, because this much I had. But I was talking passionately about both experiences, because this is my business card to enter the labor market at the end of the day. So with us, we count if the internship was subsistent per se. So if the tasks were relevant, and if there was an achievement that is related to the position that the person is applying for.
Great. Well, I'm looking at our time and I'm realizing that we need to wrap. And so I want to invite you all to offer, if you have, one do and one don't for students. Very quickly, 10 seconds. What is your do and don't in terms of a recommendation? So, Stefania, can we start with you, please?
Well, I guess it's linked to networking. Do it in a very savvy way. Don't push too much because it may backfire. But I encourage you to do a research. If you're interested in a subject in an office, do a research. Link with people via LinkedIn. If one of an alumni of your university is in a place that is of interest to you, do reach out. Do it softly and then learn how much you can push. Lastly, Tara, one common mistake when we get the applications from English speakers, and when there is the question, what language do you speak, they kind of take it for granted that they shouldn't say that they speak English. And as a result, the application is turned down. You have to put all the languages. We are an international organization, so you have to put everything. Over.
Great. Wonderful. Carmen, really quick, a do and a don't?
Sure. So do quantify all of your information within your CV. So what Manuel said is very on point in terms of not devaluating any of your prior experience. It doesn't matter where it's at. Just make sure you quantify it and make it more tangible with figures and data. And a don't, I would say, is don't send out generic applications or resumes. Please customize it. Let us know you've done your research, that you know about the role as well as the organization, and pay attention to those grammatical errors as well.
Perfect. I see lots of heads nodding. Manuel, anything else to add or do and a don't? Oh, you're on mute.
I was laughing at the advice of Carmen, which is don't throw applications. There are plenty of thrown applications that no one needs. Tailored applications, make strategic applications. So this was about the don't. And about the do, in most of the UN system, but especially in the UN Volunteers Program, the method of selection is based on competency-based interviewing. Please look around. There is plenty of material in the internet about competency-based interviewing. Prepare yourself. The technique is as such that you cannot just jump there, go unprepared. You need to be prepared and do a good interview. So first, write a strategic application that, as Carmen said, at the extent possible is quantified, but also what I see missing oftentimes is achievements. People speak about roles, responsibilities, but they don't close the cycle by adding at least one achievement per work experience. 50% of the job. The other 50% is do a good competency-based interview or whatever other interview that you are invited for. And let me end with the advice of my grandfather, who used to say that for the employment, you always need a pinch of luck on top of your head to be where you want to be. And please don't plan. Many people are trying to plan that in 5 or 10 years they want to be at this level, at this organization. If you want my advice, no. Especially in the international cooperation arena, if you speak to people, they will tell you that in a week they packed, they went, they tried. It happened to be good, they are still there.
Thank you. Excellent advice. And last but not least, Luciana?
Well, I'll keep it very practical. I see a lot of applications that say UNDP and UNICEF, and I just remind myself that I work at the United Nations Population Fund, but I take it as a compliment that people are applying to all organizations of the UN, which is fabulous. But read your application, and if you can, just check out UN Term. UN Term, you can Google it. The UN has its own language. It's the language of alphabet soup, acronyms everywhere. You may not know what they're talking about until you look it up and what geographic location uses that acronym. That can help you wherever you apply, but I do welcome you to apply to the UN Population Fund as well. Thank you for your time, everyone.
Thank you all for your time and for sharing such great advice and tidbits for the students. I hope that this is helpful for all of you students who are still with us. Kelly, any final remarks?
Just thank you all for participating today, and we hope this was helpful, and we just wish you the best of luck in your career endeavors in the future. Thank you.
That concludes the presentation. Thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you.
And panelists, you can stay on. We're going to wrap up.